Dear Westminster Councillors, you have inherited an unpopular, unsuccessful, incredibly expensive and harmful policy from your predecessors. Worse, I'm pretty sure that the people managing that policy are intentionally lying to you. I've spent the last month going through the 114-page report titled Busking and Street Entertainment Licensing Policy Review Report. It was drafted in order for you to debate in October. Unfortunately, I believe that it contains multiple demonstrable lies and distortions. The report's executive summary says that during the 2 years of operation, there was a notable increase in complaints related to busking. That's its basic message. Complaints about street performers have gone up. Here's how the newspapers covered the report. Buskers face West End crackdown as complaints rise. Crackdown on buskers after thousands of noise complaints. Crackdown on buskers after noise complaints skyrocket. But this is based on a total misrepresentation of the facts. Here's a chart in the report that shows the total number of complaints in the borough over the last 4 years. It clearly demonstrates that after 2 relatively stable years, complaints visibly shot up in 2021 and are still really high in 2022. That chart is lying. It shows that between April and December 2019, buskers received 959 complaints. But we have the raw complaints from earlier Freedom of Information requests. The real figure during those months is 1,693 complaints, a 77% increase on what's shown, and, importantly, higher than the complaints that the council claims buskers received in 2022. No other chart in the entire document lays out pre-license and post-license complaints, so this is the only graphic in the report showing a visual representation of whether complaints have gone up or down, and it's lying. But the misrepresentation is way worse and goes far further than a single graphic. It's clear that there was a spike in 2021. Helpfully, the council, eventually, gives 3 reasons why complaints might have gone up that year, which have nothing to do with the buskers. First, they admit that an expectation was established when the scheme was introduced that the council would have the resources to actively ensure compliance. In other words, if people thought their complaints would mean more, they'd be more likely to complain. They also admit that the council has also made it easier for residents and businesses to report complaints, so a higher percentage of those who wanted to complain would actually go through with it. Third, COVID was a factor. Since they'd been deathly quiet during lockdowns, once they ended, the return of activity that generated any noise could have given rise to additional complaints at the time. But that's not the only thing that COVID changed. The council should have gone on to mention that in 2021 a lot more people were working from home, right next to the pitch. Businesses near pitches, actually businesses nationwide, were being told to keep their windows open, letting air out and, obviously, sound in. But perhaps more than anything else, the consultation itself, by way of the council going around and speaking to locals, acted as an advertisement for the complaint system. The rise in 2021 might simply have been because suddenly people had discovered that there was a complaint system. So more people knew how to complain, it was easier to complain, people were more likely to complain. COVID forced people to work from home, businesses to open their windows, and had created temporary silence that suddenly ended in 2021. Any discussion about the complaints data that doesn't start with all that context is borderline fraudulent. It's definitely bad science. But once you've seen how much complaints have reduced since 2021, it looks highly suspect for the council to ignore all that. Here's how they begin talking about complaints. Since the introduction of the scheme, the council has received 5,070 complaints within the period of April 21 to May 2023. On average, the council receives around 2,200 complaints per year relating to buskers and street entertainers. They don't spell it out for you, but 5,070 complaints in 26 months is an average of 2,340 per year. So yes, higher than normal. But let's look at the first chart again. Did you notice that it left out 2018 with no explanation? What about the fact that it leaves out January to March? So let's add those back in and add the months that we have data for in 2023 and then look at the average complaints per month for each of those years so that we can compare apples to apples. If you do that, you get this. Immediately you can see that 2022 and 2023 had fewer complaints per month than 2019. That's a pretty big difference to the council forced to act after complaints skyrocket claim put out in the press. Also, the dotted line is 183 complaints per month. That's what you get if you divide 2,200 complaints per year, that's what the council says it normally gets, by 12. You can see that 2019 was worse than average, 2022 was average, and 2023, so far, has been much better than average. The council could claim that that's just a seasonal thing. After all, this doesn't include 2023's summer data. We also don't have full data for all of the seasons, so again, we'll divide the latest data by season and then get monthly averages. Here's what that looks like. What a different story. If you were in charge of writing this report and wanted the buskers to look bad, you could first lie about how good things used to be, then group all the complaints from the last 2 years into one lump sum and put that up top. But if you wanted to be honest about what was actually happening, you'd give people the context first, explaining why external factors and not buskers are the likely cause of the initial bump in complaints. Then you'd show that the rate of complaints was average last year and below average this year. And if you really wanted to dig down, you'd mention that complaints went down every season for an entire year and that complaints have been way below average since autumn 2022. That's the truth, and yet the council simply put, there was a notable increase in complaints related to busking.